Fantastic. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. If you're joining us in Spain, it's the afternoon. Who knows? Perhaps where you are, it's the middle of the night or even the morning. So we've got our second webinar of the day today. We're very happy to have been able to have rescheduled last week's chat with Ilá and James to talk about the Raise Up project. So this is a series of books that they have authored and a group that they founded to make materials which are more diverse and inclusive. I'm going to be keeping an eye on the chat in the Facebook page as always, so feel free to post any messages there. They're going to prepare the resources and then there'll be time for questions at the end, so keep those questions coming. Okay, well, thank you, James and Ilá, for joining us today. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Teresa, and everybody from the TEFL Development Hub for the opportunity. It's always a pleasure to talk about that, right, James?
Absolutely, yes. Thanks very much for the invitation. Sorry I couldn't be here last week, but I'm happy to make up for it now. So,
sure.
Yeah.
And let's make the best of it.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so let's start with let's open the PowerPoint. There we go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course, we are going to talk about Rise Up and the project we are involved in the books, but we also want to talk about how we can make materials and resources for our lessons and classrooms more inclusive. So we are going to talk a little bit about that as well. And the first thing we would like to mention is what the current situation is regarding inclusion, diversity, and representation in ELT materials and resources in general, not only materials. Think about, for example, videos or handouts that we download from the internet, for example. So we have assembled actually with our teaching experience, our materials writing experience, our teacher training experience, we have noticed that there are some things that have gotten better, that have improved, and some things that are still not there yet. So we came up with this list that keeps growing every time we sit down to chat about this. This list keeps growing, which shouldn't. It should actually get shorter and shorter. But we have noticed, for example, that regarding women, gender roles, and Black community, Black people, the materials have actually gotten a little bit better. So we have more women and more Black people in position of power represented in course books. For example, we have less stereotypes, like in terms of professions with gender and Black people with with women and Black people. But on the other hand, there is a whole list of people or groups or even topics that are either not there yet or are stereotyped. Okay, so for example, if you think about LGBTQIA plus community, they're definitely not there. We didn't come across with any LGBT for example, family, for example, in the course books that we have taken a look and we have come across. When you think, for example, about disabled people and the elderly, we do have them represented, but they're very much represented in a way that is stereotyped. And James is going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. And also some topics. So if you think a look of the materials that we have and the resources that we have, it's pretty much white, young, heterosexual, urban, middle-class people that are there. So when you get these as the norm, we exclude all these, and physically fit as well. All of these groups, they're not there. And again, now James is going to talk a little bit more about the stereotypes that we have with some of these groups that are represented, but misrepresented in materials. James?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, by the way, before we continue, I should say to the people watching, like, we would love to hear your questions, comments, and everything at the end. So please write everything in the chat that you want to say, and then we have time at the end to catch up. Teresa's going to report back for us. So please, please don't hold back. Let us know what you're thinking. We'd love to continue the conversation after our presentation.
Definitely.
Okay, so So when we consider these groups, we have to consider what's there, what's not there, and what's stereotypes, right? So as Ilá said, there are some groups that are overrepresented. There are some groups that are underrepresented or completely absent. And then there are some groups that are represented in a way that is very limited. And so when you think about, to focus on one example of elderly people, think about a way that often elderly people are represented in materials in general. I mean, maybe even more specifically in young learner materials. Then you're going to see, these types of elderly women in this case. So you've got the sort of two types of grandmother there in the two cartoons, right? One which is the kind of sort of cranky and slightly scary grandmother, and then you've got the very cute knitting, sitting in her rocking chair or armchair type of grandmother with their little glasses. And then the other type in the photograph is the inspirational figure, where this is someone who is achieving something incredible, like here climbing a mountain or hiking or something like this, which she is doing in spite of her age, right? So these are, I mean, there's nothing wrong with any of these per se, but then the problem is that if these are the only representations you see, then it doesn't allow a space for elderly women to just be and to have like regular lives, to do regular things, right? So it's very limited. It's a very limited portrayal. To give an alternative, in one of our Raise Up lessons, we have a lesson which is about an elderly woman and about travel. This is how she's portrayed here. And so she's shown to be kind of, she's taking part in a carnival, a Brazilian like a carnival festival type of event. That's why she's holding the umbrella, because it's part of that, what happens in that particular city. So she's participating in this, and the whole, everything that she does during this this holiday that she takes, that you see in the lesson, is not sort of limited by her age, right? She's doing the things that she wants to do, and she happens to be an older woman, but that doesn't limit her, and we're not restricting her because of that. So there are choices here, that there are choices that can be made about how people are depicted, and often what is chosen is the most sort of limited. Well, if they're chosen at all, because many of these groups are completely absent. But if they are depicted, then they're depicted in a very limited, sort of boxed in, stereotyped way. Okay, Ilá.
And just to complete what James has just said, the same thing goes with, for example, disabled people. Although we don't have like a stereotype that is there, they're only there if they have made something incredible. And that gives me the impression that they can only be there if they make something incredible. There's also a message that we don't want to be conveyed. They cannot be there just because they exist, like any white, young, middle-class, person. We can be there just because we are, but disabled people can't. They have to do something incredible. So the thing is that when we start bringing these groups that are not represented or presenting more accurately, the ones that are misrepresented, this is beneficial for the classroom, for the students, for the teacher, for everyone. And there is a lot of important things that we need to point about this inclusion and diversity in our course books. First of all, when we bring that, it can help our students to form their identity. James, I think you can speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think that by well, the phrase that Ilá always likes to use is, you can't be if you can't see it, right? And so what learning a language can do is, it's an inherently cultural experience. And so this can help you. By learning a language, you should be coming into contact with more cultures, more people, even if it's not physically with those people, but other worlds, other ways of being. And so what this can enable students to do is to help them understand their own place in the world, particularly if they live in a place where they don't feel like they belong, which is the way that many people feel who belong to those groups that we mentioned at the beginning. So if they feel that they don't belong in that particular place, this can give them an outlet and an understanding that, yes, there are places in the world for people like you. And so I think you shouldn't underestimate how important learning a foreign language can be in terms of helping someone, especially teenagers, helping them understand their place in the world and give them access to a whole other world of possibilities.
Yeah, and if, for example, if you go through, if you watch documentaries, or if you watch interviews or read interviews with trans people, what's a common thing in every trans narrative is that they have always felt that they didn't belong, and they just understood who they are when they saw a transgender. So when they saw a transgender woman, for example, a transgender girl saw a transgender woman, said, no, that's who I am. I didn't know that I was there until I was that person that was a transgender before I saw a transgender. So I think this is one big example about how it helps our students to form their identity.
And of course, this leads into the next one, which is, the students can be themselves. So what you're doing is creating a classroom in which students don't have to try and pretend to be someone they're not. You're allowing them to be who they really are. I think that's pretty clearly, that's something that we would all want, right? If we were able to go to a language lesson, and we would want to be able to be comfortable in being ourselves. And I think for a lot of us that have privilege, that we can take that for granted. We don't really, we don't have to hide ourselves away or aspects of our identity away. But there are plenty of people out there who do. So we can create an environment which is more open and welcoming to our students, which directly feeds into the next point, which is acceptance is motivating, right? So Zoltan Dornier, the sort of guru in ELT of motivation, in writing about motivation, and nothing to do with diversity and representation, but one of his key principles of motivation requirements is that you have to feel accepted as you are. If you don't feel accepted, then it's a barrier to your learning. I mean, the students are not as likely to be as motivated to engage with their language lessons if they don't feel accepted as the people that they are.
And there are some scholars that discuss motivation that even say that it's possible for students to grow passive resistance to the language, the culture, to the classroom practices, to the syllabus, if they feel that their voices are not acknowledged. So the fact that they can be themselves, that they are accepted, that they feel accepted in the classroom, can actually has a direct impact to motivation. And also, all of these makes the classroom a safe space for students. And most of these groups that we mentioned, they do not have a safe space in many parts of the society. So feeling that their voices are acknowledged, that the classroom is a safe space for them to be who they are, it's something that fosters motivation and really boosts learning, definitely. But there are other benefits as well. So for example, if we have a Black person or even an LGBT member, a community member in the classroom, and they don't see themselves there, or anybody who's not white, fit, middle class, heterosexual, and all these things that we listed that are there, if they don't see themselves there, they actually don't feel that they belong to the English-speaking world. It's not only to the classroom. They just said, this is not a language that is for me, because the speakers of these languages have nothing to do with me. I don't identify with them. And then takes away their ownership of language. On the other hand, if they sense that they belong to the English-speaking world, this is also a motivational factor. So this involves a lot. And even if we think about groups, they have always been there, okay? The norm, white, heterosexual, groups. Even if you teach a class that only has these members of this group, which is difficult, but normally it can happen, or it can be an argument. Say, no, but I don't need that because all my students see themselves there. Still, we are offering different narratives. Still, we are offering different perspectives. Still, we are offering a wide variety of faces, cultures, to students that might not be exposed to that. And that goes straight to empathy. So they start seeing the world with different eyes, and maybe from different perspectives, if you bring those perspectives into the classroom. And that definitely fosters empathy, teaches or shows people that there are other normals. There's not only one normal, only one thing that is normal. And but not least, of course, you have the aspect of bullying. When you think about norm, if you have one norm, only one group that is taken as the normal group, anything that deviates from that norm is mocked. Anything that deviates from that norm is not well accepted. It draws too much attention. And this is one of the causes of bullying. There are others, of course. I don't want to simplify bullying. That's a complex topic. But one of the causes, the main causes for bullying, is the deviation of what is taken as norm. So when we bring that to our classroom, when you bring other narratives, other voices, our students' voices, we are also preventing cases of bullying, especially with young learners or teenagers. Yeah, I think that's all I had to do. I talked a lot, sorry. I got carried away. I do get carried away with this.
Go for it.
That was all that I wanted to talk about, the importance of this.
So
and
let's
now
talk about adapting learning resources, right? So we want to give some tips now for the people watching to give you some ideas of what you can do to, adapt the resources that you have, right? So because obviously, we know that not all teachers can create completely new lesson materials for every single lesson. You've been given a course book that you have to use. So this is about what can you do to adapt the materials that you already have to make them more inclusive, okay? So the first one is just an overall aim, right? So remember that your aim is with your students in mind. So you'll notice for the list that we just mentioned there, we were talking about the students, right? We were not talking about our political beliefs and our sort of, political objectives or anything like that. That's not what this is about. This is about what is best for the students, because that's what it should always be about with teachers, right? And so your primary aim is to create an inclusive classroom, right? You're trying to create a classroom in which everybody there feels that they belong. That should be front and center of your mind as you're trying to create or adapt materials, right? How can I make my students feel that this is a place where they belong? So that's the first point to keep in mind. Okay, Ilá, you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, the best thing that we can think of straight away to adapt or supplement materials that you have with image. A picture worth 1,000 of words. We know that that saying. We have been saying that forever, have been listening to that forever, and that's true. So one thing that helps us adapt materials, even the course book we are using, is just like look at that and say, how can I substitute this image that I have in my course book for an image that is a little bit more inclusive, that brings more people that are normally not there. And there are lots of image banks, that database, we are going to mention that in the end. But this is, I think, the rule of thumb. If you don't have time, if you don't have much to do, you cannot do much because of syllabus constraints, just go for images. But watch out as well. There are some traps that we can fall in. This is a simple Google image search for gay couples, which is already thinking about inclusion, right? Because we want to bring LGBT community into that. But if you take a closer look and think about what we mentioned in the beginning as the norm, which is white, young, good looking, fit. Apart from being homoafective couples, all these images also fit the norm. They deviate from the norm established, not my norm, not your norm, but the norm established, because they are same-sex couple. But still, there is one couple, there is two Black women, and there isn't a single couple here in this group that is, one is older than the other, for example, or one is Black, the other is white, or that have non-feminine women with shorter hair, bigger, or more in a more masculine way. I don't like to use this term, but this is the faster way to convey.
Everyone is really good looking.
Yeah, fit.
They're all like models. They all look middle class.
Exactly. So even when we are thinking about inclusion, we need to have these critical eyes to analyze what's behind that image, because it says 1,000. It's worth 1,000 words. We have more images, right? Go on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll go. So to move on to the next point. But before I talk about point number 3, I just want to continue that idea of images. So here, the topic is discussion questions. So here are 2 images to represent that. And then if you think about images, well, the picture on the left may be seen by some people as inclusive because there's a Black woman in it. But I find that image quite problematic in a lot of ways, because I think that it's quite a strange photo actually the more you look at it, because you have this sort of one Black woman there who's completely outside the group. She's staring directly at the camera. She's not really involved in the discussion. And there you have the sort of, young white people there sitting around discussing. So it's a bit of an odd image. I mean, I guess it's better than nothing, but it's still not great, I don't think. And it's also, I have a bit of an issue with these kind of very glossy style of photographs that you get from image banks, where everything's very perfect. I think they make for kind of quite artificial, dull photos. The picture on the right, also to just to look at discussion questions, I think is a more interesting image. It's obviously these people are not white. They're all young women. And I think that it illustrates the topic just as well as maybe even better than the picture on the left. So again, it's the idea of of the trap. You don't just see a photograph and you see, okay, there's more women than men, so that photo must be good. Or there's a person of color in this photo, so it's fine. Exactly as Ilá said, okay, that's true, but can I dig a bit deeper here? Can I think about what else could be going on? Anyway, so going on to discussion questions. Discussion questions are a really good way of being able to change something which is in the course book without it being a huge amount of work, right? So because if you've got your course book laid out there and you've got the lesson, the language objective for that lesson is a particular grammar point or vocabulary area or something, there's a particular listening or reading or something, if you wanted to change those, if you wanted to change a reading text to make it more inclusive, then that's a lot of work for the teacher, right? They've got to go and find another text somewhere. They've got to make sure it's the right level. They've got to be able to produce it in a way that the students can access it. In a face-to-face classroom, they might have got to print out all these pieces of paper and everything. So that's a much harder thing to do. Whereas, as we said, changing the images before as a kind of leading activity, or in this case, changing the discussion questions that you will usually find maybe as a lead-in, or maybe after the language-focused activities, just to sort of complete that focus on a text. those are much easier to substitute. So you can just change them, right? I mean, and not just changing them in terms of inclusion as well, but in other ways, you can add more critical questions. Often those questions in course books don't really dig very deep. They just tend to sort of ask like questions about, have you experienced anything like this? Is there this thing in that culture? Is there a thing like that this in your culture? And so on. You can depend, and of course, the context in which you're teaching and the culture in which you're teaching. So you can create questions which are, are really good for that context, but then also, how far you can push it, because not everyone can push it in the same way, right? How far can you take this discussion? Where are the places that you can make students go that are really fertile areas of conversation that maybe in another culture would be more difficult to do? So that, and then it's a way that you can add inclusion into the lesson without having to rewrite the entire lesson, basically. Okay, let's go on to number 4.
Just for example, a good example of these discussion questions, if you have, for example, a family tree, just because we start talking about LGBT, and just thinking about a heterosexual, typical heteronormative family, you just simply ask, what other models of family can you think of? And students come up with that. Or if you're thinking about jobs, for example, so why are these jobs, astronaut, rock star, or whatever is there that is not in reality, why are some jobs more valued than the others? And these type of questions that actually encourage critical thinking. And that goes straight to the next point, because first, again, you're bringing different narratives so when you ask these questions, you're making your students see things from different point of view, and that already encourages empathy. But when you ask questions, when you or when you question the absence of something, so why are these families that you brought up are not here? You're also making it more learner-centered, because they are going to come up with the issues, not you. And nothing about sense, we shouldn't use this is not right, because it is a family that exists, but it's not the only one that exists. And it's difficult for me as a Brazilian not to mention Paulo Freire, which is one of the biggest names, if not the biggest name, in critical pedagogy. But the things, when we are teaching like this, when we are encouraging our students to see things from other narratives, when we are, for example, we can substitute a text about a fact about a city with a fact about the Black Lives Matters in that city that is in the course book, for example, or a text about the Pride Parade of that city. So when we do that, with the aim of bringing up different narratives to the classroom, we are also, according to Paulo Freire, training our learners' eyes to spot and fight injustice. So we are doing much more than just bring up nice materials that give a different perspective from students. We are actually using education as a tool for social change. And by bringing pictures, discussing these questions, bringing alternative texts, for example, we are actually leading your students to this path of empathy and intercultural understanding. When, for example, we bring, instead of talking about a text about London, we can, or a video about London, why not bringing a video about South Africa, for example, or a city in Africa that speaks English, or any other country that speaks English that is not a country from the UK or the US or Canada or Australia, which is the main circle. These are things that help bringing up facts of the city, of the country, of anything that is there in your course book. I think this encourages all this critical thinking, intercultural understanding, and it's also adding and not censoring.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to clarify a couple of the terms here in this one, because so by criticism, what we mean is the like related to the idea of critical thinking, right? Of being able to critique. Articles, texts, photos, etc., as not criticizing people. And then by censorship, what I mean is if you have materials in your books which you don't think are up to the job, then that maybe, I think personally, it's better to use them as an opportunity to analyze them with the students, as opposed to just saying, oh, this is no good, I'll get rid of it. I mean, unless it's really, truly terrible, but I think it's hard to find those kind of materials nowadays. But, you know, if you think, well, you know, it's a bit limited, it could be better. Okay, then use that as an opportunity to discuss it with the students, as opposed to just sort of, you know, deleting it from the lesson. Okay, so number 5 is, you know, in terms of these questions, you know, focus, you know, you're asking the students to focus on what is missing. Right? What is missing from the book or these pages? Look at this lesson. What is missing here? Who are missing as well, right? Who are the people that are missing here? Look at bias. You know, there's always bias. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's good to be able to identify what that bias is. Whose perspective has this been created from? The values. What values does this lesson represent? You know, I think that the idea that the kind of standard, very what people think is a kind of very neutral kind of coursebook subjects, you know, travel, shopping, work, all of these things are absolutely laden with values, and yet they're somehow presented as if they're kind of neutral, as if they're not representing anything in particular. And that's completely wrong. I mean, they are absolutely full of values. And it's only fairly recently I've started to see activities in coursebooks, for example, where you have something about shopping, and then there are questions about consumption and the environmental impact of purchasing and things like this. I just started to see that. Well, there's one book where I've seen that so far, which is very good. But you know, that's the kind of thing that should be there more often. So when we look at these things, what are we looking at specifically? Okay, what are the rules that are represented? What are the activities, the resources, the people, and the power? Who has the power on the pages of our course books? And these 3 questions come from John Gray, who said, you know, these are questions that you can ask your students to discuss. You know, why is this topic here in the book? How is the topic and the subjects being presented, and what other ways of presenting about the topic and the subjects are there? So these are really simple, but I think excellent analytical questions that we can use with our students. Okay, anything you want to add about that, Ilá, or you want to go?
Yeah, I would just add another question, like who's not there, right? I think that's or what's not there, not only what the topic is there. What's missing, exactly. And one thing going forward to the 6th topic is we shouldn't expect that we can include everyone and everything in one lesson or in one unit, in one course, and that we can be accurate about representing all of these groups on their own. So, and I tell that from my experience as a material writer for Raise Up, and as a teacher, and as a political person, ask for help. So if you don't know if the terminology you're using is correct, ask somebody who does. If you don't know how to include, how to accurately represent a certain group, try to talk with a person from that group, for example. How would you like to be represented here? Or talk to other teachers that have more experience with that. How should I adapt these material, for example? Or even just go for ready-made resources such as Rise Up, of course, but there are others that are there to help us to make our lessons more inclusive, so our materials more inclusive. So we shouldn't be afraid to know that we don't know anything. I think this is an important thing here. We can't know anything. We are not able to do it. And when we talk about bias and values, we have our own. And our bias will be conveyed if we don't have an external point of view, if we don't listen to other narratives as well. So what we are trying to do with our students, with our materials and with our classrooms, we should be doing to ourselves. Analyze how biased am I? What are my unconscious bias? Why do I want to represent this group more than the other? How should I represent? Is that correct? Because my representation is not accurate enough. So asking for help in this case, especially with groups that we don't belong to, but we want the groups to belong, it's essential.
Okay. So these are the caveats, right, that we have to bear in mind when we're talking about this subject. Okay, we mentioned one already with the images and the stereotyping, but there was some more. So this is a quote by Judy Boyle from the, I've forgotten the name, sorry, Ilá, do you remember the name?
I have just seen a plenary of her in Tissot, Greece.
I've gone completely blank, but she basically works with
human trafficking.
Human trafficking, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, with this quote, what she's basically saying is, you know, like, you know, okay, you want to tackle these subjects, but don't, you know, exploit these subjects. Don't exploit the pain of other people, especially if they're in your classroom, for a grammar point, right? It's not worth it. So be sensitive, be aware, be careful.
Yeah, and especially because some things can be triggered if you have been there, if you have been through it. So we should be very, very careful when tackling these subjects in the classroom. So we don't use that just as, okay, look, this is a nice story of a person who was murdered because she was like, whoa, no, that's not something you do in the classroom. That goes against everything that we talked about, a welcoming and safe space in the classroom.
Yeah. Okay, so now this is an example of an activity which is truly terrible. And it comes from a very popular website. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it's a resource for teachers. And this was a lesson about kind of gay issues and gay marriage and so on. And if you look at this activity, it's very offensive because it says, you know, in pairs and groups, discuss which of the following should be allowed, okay? Which should be allowed. So should gay marriage be allowed? Should gay parents be allowed? Should gay bars be allowed? We continue, right? And then you think, okay, these are pretty bad. But then, you know, should gay rights be allowed? You know, should gay people be allowed to have any rights? Should gay bashing be allowed? If you're not familiar with that term, gay bashing is a term that means where gay people are attacked on the street and beaten up. So it's asking the question here, should gay people be allowed, you know, should it be allowed to attack gay people on the street, right? I hope for everyone watching this, I don't have to explain how offensive that is, right? It's offensive in any context. To take into a classroom is a disaster. Another example. This is from a course book. And so it's a, you know, a discussion activity. Your friend would like a girlfriend. The problem is he works long hours and is too tired to go out in the evenings. He usually buys a takeaway meal and falls asleep watching TV. He doesn't have any hobbies and is getting fat. You know lots of single women, but you don't think they would be interested. And so the question I would ask about this activity, which is the kind of thing that's very easy to slip through the net, that can very easily end up in a lesson, is, you know, if this was a reasonably accurate description of one of the students you have in your lesson, how do you think this would make them feel? How would they feel about this, right? So what we've got here are two different issues, right? In the first one here, what we're doing is we are creating a space where we can legitimize the discussion of things which should not be discussed. Okay, there's a limit. Okay, as far as I'm concerned, in my classroom, when I'm teaching, there is no space for prejudice. You know, and I think, you know, there are some people who say, okay, we should let our students say whatever they want, and it should be an open space for free conversation and all this kind of stuff. Those people, and I know that those people exist in society, but I'm sorry, I'm not thinking about them. I'm thinking about my other students. the students who are gay, who other no one knows they're gay, who have to be subjected to that discussion where their entire identity is being discussed as if whether it's legitimate or not. That's just not acceptable to me. I never want to put any of my students in a position where they would feel that way. With this example, well, what you're doing is, you know, creating an environment where people can be criticized, you know, they can be made to feel basically like a loser, right? And, you know, it's like creating that feeling of, what is it that, you know, well, I guess it is the same point really, is that basically the student who could identify with this guy is going to feel pretty lousy about themselves, maybe, you know, maybe they do, maybe they don't, I don't know that. But this is about my job as a teacher, right? My job as a teacher is to make sure that it doesn't happen. And if there's a possibility it does happen, then it's wrong. I have to get rid of it. So we have to be very careful about, you know, like these kind of ideas, these activities, which we're, you know, okay, we're going to talk about the subjects that people don't talk about, or we're going to include other people and everything. Go, yeah, but on what terms? How are we including them, right? So in our Raise Up materials, we tend to be, you know, we look at an inclusive approach to these groups, right? We just are including these people without necessarily discussing the issues around their identity. We're not really interested in doing that. Right?
Yeah, especially because discussing these issues can be triggering. Yeah. You can open room, give room for homophobic comments, for example.
Yeah.
So,
and you're legitimizing them by giving them space to do that,
exactly,
which is not acceptable. Yeah. Okay.
And that brings us to our books. One of the resources you can go for. to look for help if you want to try to make your classroom more inclusive. We have so far 3 books published. The first one, which was the one on the left, is the first one. It's a multi-level group book. You have lessons that range from A1 to B2, C1. And it was basically written by James and Ilá. That was the first. It was basically 2 people job. These 3 because they're illustrator, but still it was a very small group of people doing that. Half of the lessons are mine, half of the lessons are James's, and then we aim at a multi-level group. And then we have the one in the right, which is a B1. And this had a change already, because the first one was such a success. Many people wanted to get involved, and we wanted to bring more narratives and more voices to Raise Up. I mean, it would be a little bit controversial. Weird. Okay, thank you. Weird. As weird as this sun that's shining on my face right now, that shouldn't be there. But anyway, it would be weird to only us talking about inclusion and diversity. So we started bringing up more authors. So half of this book was written by me, and the other half were by guest authors. And these guest authors were both very experienced authors like Hugh Teller, or unexperienced authors, or people with less experience writing. And then at the end of last year, we launched a B2 book, which is basically a lesson with a different author. Every lesson was written by a different author. And it's a huge difference between the first one, was James and I, and one illustrator or 2. And this last B2 book, which is more than 20 people involved in terms of illustrators, editors, authors, proofreaders. Yeah, pretty much that. And we have some more in the oven for this year, right, James?
Yep. So we're working on the A1 and A2 books right now. So they are being written by our writers as we speak. And so they'll be published in the year. We've also just published a PowerPoint version of the B2 book as well for your online lessons.
True.
So so you can now buy like an extended pack of the B2 book, which also included audio for the first time. So there were 2 listening lessons with transcripts. And then we also have now added the PowerPoint version as well. So and future books will contain more things, but I can't tell you what they are yet. But they will.
Not yet, not yet.
Not yet. And we will go back and extend the previous books as well eventually. When we have time.
True. And we also have the blog right now, right? Up and running.
Yes. So we have a blog as well, which is posted at the moment weekly, and it will be every couple of weeks or so in the future, where we have different articles, lesson plans, and interviews, etc. So that we are, so we're sharing on our blog as well. So we want to create a resource there that will be useful for anyone who's interested in this subject, not just the materials, but this is why we call it the Raise Up Project, right? Because it's not just about the books, but also the things that go around those books as well, including presentations like this one. Yeah.
Exactly. And of course, there are other resources, right, that you can go to help.
Yeah, we've chosen a couple here.
Yeah,
right?
Go on.
No, go ahead. It's okay.
No, the first one, and you see, that's why we are talking about the images. This is a homoaffective couple. But look at the difference between this image and the image that we had previously. I mean, first, they're not at the same age. Secondly, they are not young. They are using technology, even if they are older. I mean, that's not something that we should assume, right? But it's a big difference. And this is from Tyson Seaburn from Teacher Development SIG in IATEFL. That's his work, right, James?
Yep.
And would you like to mention the Ideal Plus resource?
Yeah, so Ideal Plus are a new company that we're started to work with. That's all one URL there at the bottom, by the way. Well, it's on 2 lines, it's one URL. And they specialize in assessment, inclusive assessment materials. And so they've started to publish on their blog some activities and lesson plans and so on that you can find there to download. So there's just two resources that we particularly like. On Tyson's, he basically created a couple of coursebook units that he imagined this is what they could look like, right? And so that's good, and we're very happy that Tyson is going to be working on one of the next Raise Up books. So
yay!
So that's great. So yeah, so there's a couple of resources for anyone who's interested.
Who needs to ask for help, as we talked before.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up there. So what I want to say before we finish, right, is the fact that when we talk about this subject, you know, we're talking about materials creation, and we're talking about identity, and what you understandably hear from a lot of people is that people are very interested in how they can represent the group that they belong to, right? And that's completely understandable why people would feel like, I don't see people like me in the materials that I teach with, so I would love to see more of that. So, you know, this is what I want to do. And that's great. But what I would also want to add is what I think is really important is the fact that, you know, that's not enough, right? For all of us. So for everyone who's watching this, who creates materials, whether it's just materials that you create for your lessons, or whether you're a published coursebook writer, that you have to start thinking about the people who aren't like you, even if you are on that list, because there are going to be very few people on our list that we had at the beginning of all those identities that can tick more than 2 or 3 of those boxes, right? And so what we need to be doing is to be thinking about how are the people who are not like me represented in my lessons as well. Okay, so that's why this is for everybody. You know, our project is inclusive, and by that we mean that the people who write for our books include all different types of people, right? We don't say no to anyone because of their identity. And so, because what we want to see is people with privilege and people with who don't feel personally affected by this, aware of this concept, and start to write lessons about people who are not like them, because that's the reality. That's what we need, right? And then, you know, we also want people who, you know, belong to some of these groups to think about the other people who are not like them as well. And furthermore, we want to make sure that we give opportunities to people with those identities to become materials writers as well, because that's another big issue that we have, is the lack of diversity within the ELT materials writers, right?
Yeah,
And
definitely.
this would definitely help in the future. And so we want to encourage people to get in touch with us. If you're interested in this topic and you're here watching this, so I think you probably are, and you're interested in the idea of materials writing, do get in touch with us, because we'd love to hear from you. And it doesn't matter if you don't have any experience, or if you have a lot of experience, or anywhere in between. We can help you through the process. We are set up for that, because we want to give new voices an opportunity to get involved. And you know, to be completely honest with you, when we try to find writers from a lot of these backgrounds, it's very difficult.
It is because of a lot of issues that we have in the world that are reflected in the ELT. Yeah. That's the point. It's not a problem with the ELT, it's the problem with the society that we live in that end up excluding these and not allowing these groups to get into positions of power or further in education or further in career. Also, what I would like to add is that we don't only need writers, we need editors, we need illustrators, we need blog posters. You have a lesson or an activity that you want to post, we can post it in the blog, of course, credits to you, of course. Or you have an article, you have some ideas about how to adapt this or that material, or this, I have an activity with this video. We cannot include authentic material in Raise Up for copyright reasons, but if you have a good activity with a TED Talk, with a song, with a text from an article, just write an activity. We'll be glad to publish in our blog. Definitely.
Yeah. So there are lots of opportunities for people, if you're passionate about this subject, to get involved. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
So I think that's about it.
I think that's it. Yeah, I still have 10 minutes for questions, answers.
Yeah.
Discussions.
I mean, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. And I'm just sitting here. People are saying, yep, just kind of sitting here nodding along.
That's good.
Oh, need to do that. Should be doing that. Yeah, there were a couple of interesting questions. One you touched on was about sourcing inclusive materials if you're making materials for your own lessons.
Like materials or images?
Images.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think with images, I mean, there are some specific websites that if I stop sharing, then I can find them for you. So I'll stop sharing that. And so there are some specific photo banks that specialize in diverse images. Well, I would also say some of the other photo banks are actually getting better as well. I think that they are starting. So I mean, one I like to use is, hold on, let me find it. Yeah, Unsplash is quite a good site for, you know, in general photos, and they have, I've noticed that they've started to get a lot better in terms of representation with the photos that they have, you know. So they're just like a lot of companies, I think, in the last couple of years started to take this really seriously and say, okay, the photos that we have on our site need to be better, right? So
and when we download, and from Splash, for example, when you download, you can copy the credits, and paste along with the image. So
so just a couple of other ones. So there's a site called Nappy, which is beautiful high-res photos of black and brown people. Iwaria, which is photos from Africa, and one called Tonal, I guess it's TONL. Those are just ones. And another one that I really like is Black Illustrations, which is a site which has some free packs on it, and then some you have to pay for. And those are illustrations, including Black people. So it's things like workplace illustrations, or, things like that. So those are really nice to use as well.
Yeah.
But what you shouldn't do is do an image search, do a Google image search.
Yeah, exactly.
Find whatever you find and steal the photo. Go to legal sources.
Exactly, and source then give the photographer credits if you have the website, or just source the website. Definitely.
Most of these sites are free.
Unsplash is great.
Yeah.
It's a bit glossy for my taste sometimes, though, as I said. A little bit,
a little
too
bit perfect for my.
but you know, yeah, but it is good, yeah, and it's getting better.
Yeah. Any other questions, Teresa?
I mean, we were talking. Yes, yeah, there was. What were the biggest challenges for you as you were designing and selecting material for the series?
What about for you, Ilá?
Well, I'm not an experienced writer. I started writing with Rise Up. That was the first challenge, writing a whole unit. But I got a little bit faster, at least with that. Although I think James disagree. I tend to miss some deadlines. I know. But I think what I mentioned before about knowing how to represent accurately the minority that you want to represent. I think that's my biggest challenge. I go around, and that's maybe the reason for my delay. I go around searching, asking people, maybe too much. I don't know if it's too much or not, but I think that's the biggest challenge for me, is getting accurate and covering all the points that should be covered for that type of lesson that I'm writing. So for example, one problem that I had, I think it was in the B2 book, that I want to talk about Black female inventors. And there was one of them that she was a maid at the time, like in the 2 centuries ago, and she invented the cloth wrangling machine. And but there wasn't a picture of her, because of course, who would take pictures or of a Black maid at the time? So, and I had like 3 other inventors, and I had pictures of them, so I could give them a face. So how do you give a face to somebody who doesn't have a face? So that these type of challenges that we come across and you need to overcome. I decided not to give her a face because that's not her face, but that was in the teacher's note. So make sure that you say that there isn't that, because that was the case. I think this for me is one of the biggest challenges. James, which would be for you?
Well, for me, yeah, I mean, it would be different. I think most of my work is more around the sort of coordination side of things.
That's true.
So you know, getting everything done on time is also I design everything, and I'm not a designer by trade, so I'm sort of self-taught. So I think I'm pretty good at it for an amateur, but you know, like, it obviously takes a lot of time to actually make the books and everything. I enjoy it, so it's good, but it's I guess it's about the time, you know, because one thing we didn't mention, we should have mentioned, was the fact that everyone is a volunteer on these books.
That's true.
Yeah, and you know, and all the money goes to charity. So basically we are volunteers, so we have to fit this around, you know, our actual jobs and work and everything. But no complaints, we enjoy it. So yeah, I guess that it's getting everything done. You know, when you have a team of like over 20 people, that's a lot of variables.
Things to manage. Yeah, definitely.
One of the questions, because you mentioned then about putting into the teacher's notes about why there would be an image or there wouldn't be an image. Have you found that you've had to supplement the teacher's notes with how teachers might approach the material? I mean, I'm assuming people who are using Raise Up are using it because they want to include these.
Yeah, they should know what they're getting into, right? But I think that the what we try and make the writers aware of in the teacher's notes is that the teacher's notes are not just an answer key, you know.
Yeah.
They have to have a lot more to them than that, because, well, I always say to them, you have to assume that the person who's teaching this lesson is not necessarily knowledgeable about the subject, and maybe not even that experienced as a teacher. Right. Yeah. So you have to assume those things and write the teacher's notes with that in mind. And then, okay, if someone doesn't need that, then it's fine. But if they do, it's there. We try to add extra resources, extra ideas, you know, possible alternative ways of using things if relevant, things like this. So we make sure that the writers understand the teacher's notes are really important.
Yeah.
Particularly
and also
for the type of lessons.
Yeah, and also giving more sources to teachers to get more knowledgeable about that specific subject. So more links or more ideas, where to research, how to prepare for that, traps that might happen, comments that might come up in that particular area, how to tackle them. So some photophobic comments can come up because you're talking about exercising. So be aware that this might happen, how to see the solution, how to tackle that. Yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we've got another couple of minutes. There are a couple more questions.
No, go for it.
There was a comment before which you kind of answered about how people can deal with the stereotypes that exist in the course books that they have to use in classes. You talked about, using it as an opportunity. Do you think that with an increase in self-published materials like this, that it might have an impact on the industry and we might see more diversity from the big four?
That's what we hope.
No, I mean,
I don't know if I think that will happen, but I hope that happens.
Well,
but I think there is, yeah, go on, James, go on.
Well, to be blunt, the big ones are publishing books which are going to be used in Brazil and in Saudi Arabia and China, right? And so those are very different cultures. So all the time that they're doing that, it's going to be very difficult for them to do it, because basically the materials that are being used in my lessons here are being determined by what is acceptable to the Saudi Arabian Ministry of Education.
Yeah.
And so all the time that that's going on, I find it, I think it's going to be very hard for them to do that. Now, is there a solution for them? I don't know. I don't work for them. That's what they're going to have to figure out. I mean, but the point about it is I think that change is always incremental. It rarely happens in a revolution. It normally takes a very long time to get anywhere, unfortunately. So what I would hope is that they try to push things in those areas where they can make some progress, and at least they're willing to try. I think what you'll probably find is that the people who work for those companies are very willing to do it. The writers, the editors, pretty much everyone would say, I'd love to do this, but I can't, right? Yeah. And so I don't think it's about, the people involved are not willing. I think it's just a case of marketing and, that side of the business. We want, part of what we do is, as well as creating materials and the blog and doing this kind of thing, we are, we do consider ourselves to be sort of, it's an activism.
Yeah, definitely.
Trying to create some pressure and getting people to talk about this within the profession.
And within the pressure also provide materials to start doing something about it, right?
Yeah, but I think realistically, where we're going to see most progress is in self-published materials like ours and in locally published materials.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
I've written course books here in Brazil, and there are things that I think I was able to do in those course books that I wouldn't have been able to do for an international publisher. There were things I also wasn't able to do. So, we're not there yet, but we could probably make more progress on a local basis than we can internationally.
Yeah, but one thing I think it's interesting that's more alternative and self-published materials are being produced is that change can start happening before, without us depending on the big ones. That's the point. I think that's... but I would say that more than, of course, I would love to see big publishers going through it. But I would also love to see, to be very, very honest, teacher training courses, official ones like the CELTA, Delta, tackling that to prepare teachers to teach like that and to prepare teachers to prepare other teachers. That's something that I would like to see, as much as big publishers going more inclusive, definitely.
One final very quick question. The 3 books that you already have, are they aimed more at adults or are they suitable for teens as well?
Yeah, teens and adults, I would say.
Teens, yeah, young adults, teens.
We say like, usually it's like 15 up, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, the young learners is still not there.
No, but maybe a little bit below 15, depending on the students, but maybe. But yeah, that's who it's aimed at. Yeah. Doesn't mean we're not going to do a young learners version in the future, of course.
Yeah. There's a lot in our minds that we don't share because we don't know if it's going to work, but that doesn't mean that we are not thinking of that.
Yeah, we would love to. It's just
absolutely. Absolutely.
Time. It's all about time. Someone wants to pay us to quit our jobs and do Raise Up full time, then that would give you a different answer.
And you mentioned that all the money at the moment is going to charity. What charities are you working with?
So there is a different charity for each book. The first one, as it was just James and I was used to volunteer in a shelter for LGBT people that was kicked out from home because of their orientation and identity. So all the money goes to that shelter in Sao Paulo, Brazil. The second one is Las Patronas in Mexico, which is a group of people that actually give away meals for people who are immigrants that are in the train that's called La Bestia. And that was a recommendation from one of the authors of the book. He's Mexican, and Sergio. And the third book.
His lesson is about them, isn't it? So,
oh, yeah, that's true. That's true. And his lesson is about this organization. So he decided to donate to that. And the third book is to Raise Hand International, which is a group. Lifting Hands. I got confused. Lifting Hands International, that is in Greece and works with refugees. And that's also a recommendation from one of the authors of the B2, Effie. She's Greek, and she recommends. So we try to link the book to the charity somehow, so people can actually benefit in different levels.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
we need to walk the talk, right?
There were so many comments.
We need to walk the talk. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I mean, thank you. That's all the questions that people have had. Obviously, people can watch the webinar on catch up. So if there are questions, drop them in the chat box in the future, and we'll keep an eye and get in touch with Ilá and James.
Absolutely, feel free.
Yeah, we're happy to pop in and try and answer any questions that people leave there.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I mean, it's great that you guys were able to come. This came from originally a post on the hub about inclusive materials, and I think I posted about Tyson's materials about Ilá, and then Borja said, oh, and I can get in touch with James to talk about Raise Up. So thank you very much for coming along today.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you. It was amazing. Thank you. Thank you all. Yeah, all the time. I could go here forever talking about this.
Excellent. Well, we'll see everyone next week. We've got the teacher training talk, trainer talking time on Tuesday. So we'll be posting the Zoom on that on Monday. And everyone have a great weekend, and we'll see you again soon.